So we're going to talk about the Kraven trailer for a moment. Darren, can you talk about your whole anti-hero thing about how you hate how they're? Yeah, can you just go into that?
I'm sorry. I'm also eating my dinner as well.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, bro.
Not
Well,
good.
first thing first, I wanted to point out, I've been thinking about it. It's kind of crazy that Venom Carnage was not rated R, but this is rated R, which makes no sense.
I agree.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my whole thing about
I agree.
anti-heroes is that I know that like there's this big trend that like, oh, not everything is so black and white. But I think some things do have to be black and white, right? Some villains have to legitimately be villainous. Not every villain has to have a super deep backstory about how they're saving the world in their own way. Like that was great with Thanos and stuff like that. But I mean, look what Guardians 3 did, right? They have a villain that is 1000% unredeemable. But did anybody hate him? No, not whatsoever. I think that only does well with villains who legitimately have that type of background. It was a bit of a stretch with Venom. He does kind of have an anti-hero saga after his whole deal with Peter Parker, not necessarily before that. But Kraven never has an anti-hero arc. If anything, he's the one who pushes Spider-Man to his darkest points, i.e. Kraven's last hunt, right? So it's just like, to make him an anti-hero and also take away the whole Russian accent thing, that's to me, that's not Kraven.
I actually would challenge that. I don't know if you read. I think it was I don't know what it was called. I'm blanking on the name. Oh, Hunted. So in recent, and I forget the like specifics of it. It was great though. It's a recent Nick Spencer comic event within his very long Spider-Man run, Amazing Spider-Man. I highly recommend that run, by the way. But you know, towards the end of like the whole thing, which he did, which was a very like villainous, he like basically locked Spider-Man and a bunch of other people in Central Park in Manhattan. It was crazy, but like he kind of like in a way understood Spider-Man a little more and was like, you know, you're all right. And he kind of like had respect for him at the end. And I think that in The Last Hunt, which is epic, you know, yes, he was a villain in that. But I think in the more recent comics, he kind of has a bit more of an anti-hero side. But, you know, like if you're just going off The Last Hunt, which is obviously the iconic OG, I could see why you would think that.
But even if that is the case, it's just like that's after years and years of constant encounters with Spider-Man.
Right. That's a valid point. It's a valid point.
This is our first introduction to Kraven.
Yeah.
You know? So I don't know. And they also did the same thing with Morbius. I get Morbius does have this kind of like anti-hero thing going on, but like
so I think the reason they're doing this, and it's not a good reason, I think the reason they're doing this is because they're making these movies without Spider-Man, and they're trying to sell these characters as the protagonist, and we don't really get villain movies. So audiences aren't used to villain movies, and I think it's their way of kind of watering it down from a villain to an anti-hero as a way of selling us, the viewer, at these characters as a protagonist.
Because that's a great way of thinking about things. And I'm not going to say this to like juxtapose you, but more so to juxtapose the studio, because that's a fair point. You're obviously talking from the perspective of the studio, not necessarily yourself.
Right. It's not what I would want. I think that's their perspective.
Yeah, but I think to juxtapose that, it's just like, well, I mean, that could be a great pull to get people into the movies. Wow, look, a villain movie. You know, nobody's ever done that before.
Right, but it's not really a villain movie. It's an anti-hero movie. Like, you know, and, you know, listen, I loved the Venom, the first one, the second one, you know, but I think that, like, with Sony, you know, they've made a lot of good Spider-Man movies, and I think people forget that when talking about the villain spinoff verse or whatever you want to call it, and
the SUMC,
the SUMC. And don't get me wrong, I think it's like a crime. And don't get me wrong, I'm gonna go see Kraven. I thought the trailer actually looked pretty good. I didn't watch it in full and like pay attention to everything because I had a lot of things going on. But I think it's like a crime because I think that creating these villain movies is doing a disservice to Spider-Man as a whole. Like, are they going to make, Kevin Feige less likely to? I already said I think they're going to use Venom based on the post credits, but are we less likely to see Kraven? Are we less likely to see? We're definitely not seeing Morbius because people hated that movie, and like they're going to keep doing this. They're going to keep wasting villains if that's how Kevin Feige sees it. And for what? These movies aren't even doing that well. Like, it's just it's a shame, and that's why you need someone like James Gunn who cares about the integrity of the characters and their stories.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the sad thing. It's like these villains is like separated from Spider-Man. It's so disrespectful in my opinion, especially when it comes to Venom. I can't tell you how pissed off I was when they first announced it. Venom by himself. Like, it made no sense to me. I'm like, bro, that storyline between Peter and Eddie Brock, Spider-Man, Venom, like, that's some of the best stories.
David Michelini.
Oh my gosh, yes. It's like those are some great stories. And I think when they screw up Spider-Man 3, it's like, okay, now I'm waiting for you guys to actually do it right. And so like it that pissed me off to no end when I saw it.
And then they teased us by putting Eddie Brock in the MCU, and the fans are like getting excited. And now, it's weird. It's weird. It's weird how they're going to freaking do things.